Welcome to the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, where each week we look at 6 of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about from all over the global data center ecosystem, including data center operators like colocation and hyperscale providers, edge, modular, and wholesale data center providers, as well as the dozens of different kinds of data center technology companies and data center facilities related companies, plus all of the construction, general contractor, design, architect, site selection, real estate, and investment folks that are responsible for all of the capital, all of the land, all of the facilities that get data centers, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure all the way to fruition, plus the vibrant outsourced sales and marketing ecosystem in and around data centers. And this weekly show, Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, is for you regardless of where you sit on the go-to-market team. Perhaps you work in some facet of sales, such as like an account executive, an AE, or a SDR or BDR, a sales development rep or a business development rep. Maybe you work in some facet of marketing, like digital marketing, demand generation, paid, social, events, fields. Perhaps you work in partner marketing if your company has an indirect playbook, or product marketing. Or speaking of product, maybe you're a product manager, or maybe you work with customers and clients post-purchase as an account manager or client success. Or again, if you have a direct and an indirect playbook, perhaps you're a channel account manager or a channel consultant or some other kind of professional that works with solution providers, managed service providers, agents, whatever is relevant for your particular business model. Or maybe you are the executive sponsor, the leader, the commander-in-chief, the pilot, the maestro, the conductor, whatever analogy works best for you, the captain, the quarterback who goes out, general manager, probably a better analogy if we're getting to professional sports teams, goes out into the marketplace and recruits the best and the brightest, the most talented to join and align and integrate and position your individuals, your teams, your organization, your company to participate in this amazing period of global growth in and around all things data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. If this is the first time that you're joining us for Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, welcome. We're thrilled to have you aboard. Make sure to let us know in the comments what you and your company do in the data center industry. We would love to know. And if you've been with us before, if you're a frequent flyer, welcome back. We are thrilled to have you with us as well. If you want to make sure that you get invited to upcoming educational events like this and get updated on new related educational resources, make sure that you're subscribed to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter. You can sign up for free directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com. This way you get notified each and every Sunday about new events and resource opportunities. So what is on the agenda for this week? First, we're going to start out by looking at how to build trust with data center decision makers. So that's a great one. And it's a huge, huge challenge that we hear about all the time. How to optimize your website for 24/7 lead generation in the AI era. After that, we'll talk about aligning your sales and marketing teams, your data center sales and marketing teams, for better lead generation outcomes. That's another big struggle that we see so many companies dealing with throughout the local and regional and national and global data center ecosystems. After that, that'll put us right at the halfway point where we'll take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor. And in the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, we'll talk about how to measure and iterate on data center lead generation effectiveness, how to track and nurture data center leads using CRM, customer relationship management, and sales and marketing tools. And as we head down the home stretch, as we get ready to land the plane on this week's show, we'll talk about how to improve enterprise data center customer communications. If you have an idea for a topic or a question or a challenge that you or your team or your company are facing that you think would make a great topic to address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments and we'll add your suggestion to the consideration queue for upcoming episodes. So, without any further delay, let's jump right into this week's first topic, which is how do we build trust with data center decision makers? That is a fantastic first place to start. How do we build trust with data center decision makers? Well, first, we need to dial in and make sure that we're crisp, super crisp and clear about at the account level what kinds of companies our company is looking to market and sell to and service and supporting and grow with. And typically, if your company does not already have a nice, crisp one page ideal client profile, ICP, you can gather this information in a couple of different ways. One, a lot of times on your website, it'll have a list of logos of the companies that you're proud to be working with, or there'll be testimonials or reviews. All of those give an indication as to the kinds of companies you're working with. And we're essentially looking to figure out what do they have in common geographically, company size, and industry wise. And in addition to those public facing cues, a lot of times there's some really good data for that sitting inside your CRM, your customer relationship management system, and your financial system. So your company leadership, your company, your chief commercial officer, your chief revenue officer, your sales leaders, certainly your finance leaders should all be able to give you clues and cues and to help to really dial in, okay, geographically, where are the companies located that we're selling to? Are we doing business globally, or just in a particular region of the world, or just in a particular country, or just in one particular part of a country? That's super important to document before we worry about getting to decision makers, because we need to really, really understand where these decision makers are located. Second, a lot of companies stumble around and waste a lot of cycles by being vague about company sizes that they work with. And for most companies, usually there's a minimum level of deal size, a minimum purchase size, minimum commitment, whatever it is, that causes you to have a floor that smaller clients need to be able to meet in order to be able to work directly with your company. For a lot of different parts of the data center ecosystem, that could be as low as 10 employees or 50 employees. For other parts of the data center ecosystem that don't really have small, medium-sized business offerings, maybe the minimum size you're looking for is they need to have at least 200 employees or 500 employees to be more solidly in that mid-market segment. At the upper end of the range for a lot of small companies, as well as much as so many companies and their leadership teams and their boards would love to be able to have a brag-worthy, boast-worthy logo account sitting on your homepage. It's also important to be realistic, especially if your company is small, that there may be a practical upper limit as to the company sizes that you can currently work with, after which the likelihood of being able to successfully sell, close, retain, service, meet all of their requirements, their financial requirements, their integration requirements, their compliance requirements, host of requirements, at which point it's like, okay, yeah, we know our sweet spot. They need to have at least 50 employees, but if they're much bigger than 5,000 or 10,000 employees, like, our likelihood of success falls off the charts. And it may be quite different if you work for a huge data center operator or you work for a huge data center infrastructure company. There likely is no limit to the company sizes that you can work with. But when you're figuring out who these decision makers are and you're really getting clear on that ideal client profile, you want to be very realistic about and very self-aware about what the band is for where you can have the most success. And a lot of larger companies, historically, these companies, not only do they segment based on region, like that you're selling in a particular country or group of countries or part of a country, but it's also super common, and has been common for a long time, to divvy up territories, divvy up sales teams by the size of accounts that you're selling into. So super common to find sales teams that sell a higher volume of lower value, financially valuable deals to small and medium-sized business. Very common to find that there's mid-market teams, very common to find that there's enterprise teams, typically a lot more stakeholders that are involved, a much longer sales cycle, much higher level of subject matter expertise that's required to move the deal forward. So we've been seeing the geographic segmentation and the company size segmentation for a long time. But what we're increasingly seeing in hyper-competitive marketplaces is we now see industry specialization as well. And that's the third part of the ideal client profile, is getting a lot of clarity on where they're located, how big or small their companies are, and what industries you're disproportionately stacking the decks in favor to win, and what industries you know that for whatever reason they're going to want something that may instantly disqualify you. So we want to know about our inclusions and our exclusions of what should be in that ideal client profile, because that has a big impact on what kinds of experience we want people to have when they land on our website, like what industries are important enough, what regions are important enough that they're each getting their own website page, that they're each getting their own premium content, they're each getting their own lead generation offer, they're each getting their own event strategy. And conversely, if you're at a stage with your company where you've found that there's a couple of industries where they're asking for requirements that you just don't have, it's not a very effective use of your sales or marketing resources or onboarding resources to try to work with companies where you just don't have something major that they're all asking for that you don't have right now. So again, not only does this impact website strategy with your homepage and your navigation, but it for sure impacts what you do with outbound prospecting. It impacts what you choose to do with inclusion exclusions when you're doing ads, digital ads, if you're using a platform like LinkedIn Campaign Manager or doing any kind of account-based marketing. It definitely impacts what you choose to do with your filtering and your views and your segmentation strategy and your CRM, your customer relationship management platform, email marketing, everything else event strategy. Yeah, totally, for sure. So we have our geographic criteria, we have our company size criteria, we have our industry criteria. Now, how do we get from the account and the company level down to the individual people? How do we get the decision makers? That's where we cross over from companies and accounts to contacts, to the humans within these companies. And typically the most important category of people, of stakeholders that we're trying to educate and build trust with are the decision makers and other members of that decision committee. And the segment that has the biggest economic bearing on that project moving forward is typically going to be called your primary buyer persona. The second most important segment is going to be called your secondary buyer persona. In enterprise situations, it's very common to have at least three, usually significantly more than three different kinds of segments, three different kinds of stakeholders that you need to educate and build trust. Whereas if you're selling more to much smaller companies like small and medium-sized businesses, 2 or 3 buyer personas may be more than sufficient. But the key part with building trust with these data center decision makers is knowing exactly who these kinds of people are and what's going on in their world. We call that doing buyer persona research or customer insight research. Like, we need really strong consensus when we look at a representative group of 10 or 20 or 30 people that fit that segment. What a day in their life is like right now. What are their 5 or 6 biggest goals that they're working on professionally, as an executive, as their team at the company level? And what are they struggling with most? What's driving them nuts? What's messing with their work-life balance? What's potentially a threat to the forward motion in their career? And we need to get these goals and challenges in their own words. Not what we think the words are, but what the words actually are, because that makes all the getting the words right, getting the context right, getting the jargon right, all of that is incredibly, incredibly important to messaging, not just on your website, but your email, your social, your ads, your events, your sales enablement, your decks. Everything depends on really, really understanding who these people are, what's going on in their world, and where you fit in. And once you have a strong consensus on those goals and challenges, that should drive everything that you do going forward with your content strategy, with your thought leadership strategy, with your event strategy. And what's super important about events, just to make sure we're on the same page, is when I talk about events, most people's default playbook is they think that they need to be at really big national and global events and have as big of a booth as possible at these events. And that works okay if you work for a Fortune 1000 company. For everyone else, it is really, really difficult to supersize your presence bigger than the giants that are in your category. What tends to work a lot better is to be a lot more specific about what these accounts are, who the companies are, and who the individuals are in the companies that really matter. Because at the end of the day, for us to thrive and build trust and educate in a self-driven buyer's journey, we need to be hyper specific about who they are and what they care about. And the self-driven buyer's journey is a really, really big deal. If we were talking about building trust with data center decision makers 10 years ago, it was quite common to find that they'd do a fair amount of research on search engines, on their mobile device. They'd ask their buddies for advice on LinkedIn. They'd watch some YouTube videos. They would attend some podcasts. They'd read some online reviews. They get about halfway through that research and decision-making process. At the time, the widely cited number was about 56, 57% of the way through their journey. They're like, okay, I took this as far as I can. Now I am ready to book the demo, take the tour, talk to sales. Okay, I'm ready for the human contact. I succumb, I submit, whatever you want to call it. So that went on for quite some time. And then 10 years came and went. And what's happened in the last 10 years? Well, 10 years of digital transformation, tens of millions of people got used to working from home at the beginning of the 2020s. A lot of baby boomers retired, a lot more Gen Z, a lot more millennials in decision-making roles. And oh yeah, at the end of 2022, this app came out that changed the world. ChatGPT, and then Copilot, and Gemini, and Perplexity, and Claude, and Grok. And what do all of these generative AI tools have in common? Well, if you thought that immediate gratification was really awesome with Google and YouTube and LinkedIn, these generative AI apps are the mother of instant gratification, immediate gratification for people that want instant answers. So in a lot of ways, you could kind of have anticipated that at some point, you as a chief commercial, as a sales professional, as a marketer, as a product, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, at some point, you were going to be in competition with that instant gratification, that immediate gratification. And this is changing the nature of who people are hiring into a lot of these business development and commercial roles. We see a lot more career IT professionals and engineers that never worked in a business development environment before, all of a sudden being super desirable. Because in a world where 83% of the buyer's journey is now over before sales contact, the only way to get back in there early and often enough to really shape the criteria is for your prospects and clients to see your team members as peers, not a vendor, not someone trying to push someone onto a deals board or make a quota, but legit peers. So we see a lot more career sales professionals investing in the same kind of training and certification programs that their prospects and clients have, at least intermediate level prospects and clients. We see a lot more companies, again, hiring the career IT professionals and engineers into this role, a lot more upskilling, cross-training, retraining going in. At the end of the day, we're trying to get you to be seen a lot more like a teacher, a consultant, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor. Why? Maybe even a thought leader. Why is that so important? Because in a self-driven world where they're more sales allergic than ever, they just don't want to spend a lot of time with salespeople. It is so incredibly important that we figure out a way to get into that first 83%. And the best playbook for building trust throughout the full journey is to make sure that we have a lot of surface area in that full journey, not just the last 17%. And the way in most cases, is professional development, learning and development, not just your professional development and your learning and development, but their learning and development, their professional development. Because when it comes to decision makers, they're really sales allergic. They don't want to spend time with sales and marketing folks anymore, but they do still need to keep their skills sharp. And to the extent that you invite these folks to in-person events, online events, a little of both, that are incredibly specific to their job function, their company size, the industry that they're located within, and they have an opportunity to learn about best practices that can help them achieve their most important goals and overcome some of their biggest challenges. All of a sudden, like, that sounds interesting. Actually, that sounds so relevant to what we're going through. It feels like I need to be there. It feels like maybe I need to bring a couple of my team members with me too. And when that light bulb goes off and they're like, I think I need to bring a couple of my team members with me as well. That's where you start to see your account-based marketing, your account-based selling, account-based experience really kicking into high gear. Because when it comes to decision makers, a lot of people mistakenly think that there is a decision maker or there's the decision maker. The reality is nearly every considered purchase is now decided by committee. So this isn't just educating and building trust with one person in this company. This is trying to dramatically improve your company's surface area in this particular target account. And that's the reason why it's so much more effective for you to get into running your own micro events, your own little micro conferences, as opposed to trying to find a needle in a haystack at someone else's huge event where, for starters, only 3% of the people are getting to educate and build trust in the first place. And even among those that are getting to educate and build trust in the first place, it's entirely possible that the demographics of that conference don't line up especially well with your ideal client profile and your prioritized buyer persona. So if you're truly looking to build trust with data center decision makers, looking to have a fantastic world-class breakfast seminar, lunch and learn, after hours, professional development track, virtual version if it's not practical for those folks to be able to attend in person, recording it, making it available on demand, repurposing it, the whole 9 yards is incredibly, incredibly important for building trust with data center decision makers. And what so many people are overlooking as well is when it comes to these decision committees, many times there are several kinds of job functions on that decision committee that will never, ever meet with someone from your sales team. Never, under any circumstances, will you ever have a conversation with that person and a member of your sales team. And as a result, the only way for you to shape perceptions with that person is through thought leadership, through educating and building trust, through content that can be spread by your internal champion to other key stakeholders on their team and other relevant teams within the company. If you decide that content schmontent, we don't need to do that, that's marketing's job, whatever, like that's only for big companies, we're not going to have a podcast, we're not going to do webinars, we don't need to educate, they know who we are, like all that stuff, it's sabotaging you more than you realize. In this self-driven buyer's journey where people just don't want to spend time with sales anymore, everyone on a commercial team, on a go-to-market team, needs to play a role in educating and building trust, from the most seasoned members who've been in your industry for decades, to the most junior members who just joined your team in the last 6 months or a year. You'd be like, what kind of role possibly could the entry-level sales development rep, the entry-level marketer play in helping to educate and build trust? Well, you still need concierges, you still need tour guides, you still need curators, you still need moderators, you still need hosts. This is a culture issue. And most of the reason why most of the data center industry is completely asleep at the wheel on this is because they think for some reason that what they have is so insanely special that the hyper technical, the hyper cynical, the hyper skeptical, sales allergic IT professionals and engineers and other stakeholders that they say are going to completely overlook the fact that they're learning somewhere, and they're going to take all that information that's building trust from learning, and they're going to throw that away, and they're going to go to the completely unknown vendor just because you happen to show up at the last minute and flash your awards and underbid or something like that. It doesn't work like that. Trust is cumulative. Building a brand is cumulative, and brand is now everything that the marketplace says about you and your team members when you're not in the room. And given that you're locked out of the room for the first 83%, best case scenario, you're only in there for the final 17% of the game. This is the new competitive battleground: visibility, insight, education, trust building, thought leadership. So this is what I'd be thinking about big time when it comes to building trust with data center decision makers. If you're enjoying this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show so far, make sure that you hit the like button to help spread the word. And if you're on a platform where you can comment, rate, and review that, we'd be super appreciative of that as well. So what is up next? Next topic is going to take us into more digital. Awesome. So this is about websites. And what's interesting about websites is a lot of times people in sales roles and account management roles and product roles have thought historically that the website should be the job of the marketing team. However, we're now all in marketing and we are now all in sales. Whether you want to buy into that or not is up to you. But when we look at a self-driven buyer's journey, where pretty much the entire company is persona non grata. If we don't figure out a way to get into their world in that first 83% as teachers and consultants and part of their professional development, part of their professional learning and development, like marketers are going much deeper into the journey than they ever have in their careers before. They're even working with customer success and account managers and product and channel partners. It's incredibly, incredibly important to have these fantastic self-serve resources so that when people are doing the research, that they can actually find you and find your topical expertise. Being the best kept is really not helping you in a world where this research and decision making is happening at instantaneous speed at all kinds of crazy times of the day. And thinking that competing against the giants, and it's one thing if you truly have the resources to be able to cover the early and the middle, the late stages of the journey. But what I see that's so incredibly dangerous is I see a lot of small companies trying to go very historically left that to their sales development reps and business development reps are now it's pretty important for them to have a presence in those early interactions, because if you're not the ones who are in there perceived as the experts, perceived as the trusted advisors, your prospects and clients are going to spend time with others who are, which means that even if you get to meet them later on in the journey, you're immediately treading water because someone else, someone else's team, someone else's company helped shape the criteria that they're using to navigate your category, immerse them, indoctrinated them with all of their best practices. So again, this is the argument for why even account executives, even account managers, product managers, channel partner managers, so incredibly important for you to have an active role, that unless you're coming at this from the position of being the number one market share company in your space, sitting out the first 83% of the game is not going to position you well. So with all of that in mind, when we come to thinking about what is important to have on a hyperscale website for 24/7 lead generation in the AI era, we're in an interesting place because generative AI for sure has shaped digital strategy. It used to be for the decade before now and the decade before that, that you would lean really, really heavily on search engine optimization and search engine marketing, because if you could just have a lot of surface area, a lot of digital real estate on page one of the search engine results page, mostly Google, that everything would work out well. Then 3 years ago, along came ChatGPT, and ChatGPT caused this existential threat moment at Alphabet, at Google, where they sent around, I forget what the name of it was, something like Code Red moment or something like this. And the answer engines, in a lot of ways, are the traditional chat tools that you probably are pretty well familiar with, like ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini, Grok, Perplexity, Claude. In addition to other kinds of answer tools like Reddit, Quora, YouTube, LinkedIn, all of these places where people are going and searching for answers to questions. So when it comes to the topics the goals, the challenges that are most important to your primary and your secondary and your tertiary buyer personas, how good is your coverage? When someone goes and asks about your category, if they're late in the journey or they're asking about the goals and challenges that are incredibly important to someone that's a leading indicator that your most important or second most important kind of stakeholder is going to be in market for your product or service in the coming weeks or coming months, how good is your surface area? Right now, you can't even buy your way in. Relatively certain with the capital requirements required to run huge P&Ls with companies like OpenAI that they will have an ads business and other monetization strategies like that in the coming months. However, at least for now, it's 100% organic. And even when there is ads, it's still important it's 100% organic. And yes, there's a lot of specialists now that are popping up, some of which have legitimate credentials, a lot of which are jumping on bandwagon, claiming to have deep expertise and getting your companies found in these answer engines. At the most basic level, a lot of the best practices for the last 10 years that were centered around like content marketing and thought leadership and events and publishing great educational resources, a lot of that is also lined up exceptionally well with the same kind of visibility that you'd want for a lot of these. So if your company has sat out the last 10 or 15 years thinking that your buyers would never read a blog post, they'd never watch a podcast, they'd never download an ebook or a special report or use an online tool or attend a webinar, because our customers, if you bought into that whole nonsense of thinking that your company was so special that you didn't need to compete, unfortunately, a lot of co-location operators and hyperscale providers got really, really good at that playbook, as did a lot of the dozens of categories within data center technology and data center facilities. So if the idea of being seen as a teacher, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, and thought leader is completely alien to your company, it is largely big time overdue for you to get back in the competitive saddle for that. And in most cases, a lot of it's going to come down to opportunity cost at this point of looking at, we're overinvested in conferences. We got to figure out what the bottom 20% of the conference investments are, and pretty much immediately take away, fire that bottom 20% and start reallocating it to how modern buyers are actually researching and making their purchase decisions. So like I talk about at length, demographic match here, like on the left-hand side of the screen, the media kit and the demographics of who attended that huge event last year and who they think is going to attend this year. And on the right-hand side of the screen, pull up your ideal client profile and your prioritized buyer personas. Is it a really good match? Does it look like at least 75, 80% of the people that attending match up really well with who's important for you to be in front of? If so, yeah, that's kind of at least an orange, could be a green light. What I'd prefer to see is that plus someone from your team being in the top 3% of conference attendees who actually gets to educate and build trust from the stage. If those two things line up, yeah, that's for sure a green light. But I see a lot of people mistaking oranges and gray areas for like a big red stop sign and red light. What does a big red light look like? You're not getting to educate and build trust. And that conference has a really, really low match rate with your ideal client profile and your prioritized buyer personas. Those are the candidates that are holding you back from redeploying your resources to where your buyer personas actually hang out. It's like you've taken the smartest people in the company, the highest paid people in the company, they're all hanging out in the final 17%, and you're a complete ghost town. You're completely missing an action in that first 83%. Wow, is that a dangerous place to be for competing and winning the best clients going forward who want to have an education and trust building kind of experience early. And that's the only thing they're going to look at that's going to get them to spend time with humans from any kind of company in the data center ecosystem. So how do we optimize the website for this 24/7 lead generation in the AI era? What it largely comes down to is most companies should be deploying some kind of playbook where on a very, very regular basis, ideally monthly, you are inviting people from your target accounts in those prioritized buyer personas, one segment at a time, to spend some time with one or more subject matter experts from your company, learning about best practices that can help them do their jobs better. How do we know what these 10 or 12 topics should be over the next 10 or 12 months? This is basic customer insight research. If we figure out the top 5 or 6 big goals that they need to accomplish this year, and the top 5 or 6 big things that are absolutely driving them nuts, their biggest stressors and challenges, well, there's your 10 or 12 topics once a month for the next 10 or 12 months. Figure out who the subject matter experts are internally within your company who could give a great 30 or 45-minute talk about that topic and share amazing best practices that would help them do their job better, help their teams function better and more competitively. Understand what best practices look like for other companies that are in the space. Now, what happens when you exhaust your internal subject matter experts and there's topics that come up as high interest where you just don't have an internal subject matter expert? They don't all have to be internal full-time salaried employees of your company. Some of the speakers that you bring in for these events could be, they could work for your company as a vendor, a channel partner, a contractor. You could have panels of channel partners. You could have panels of clients. At the end of the day, what should rule the roost, what should drive the priorities is client centricity. That goal, that challenge in their own words, and how you can deliver an amazing educational event. Now, what's messing people up and really, really getting in their head are vanity metrics, thinking that they need to be in a room with thousands of people to move the needle on educating and building trust and lead generation. When in reality, if 80% of the people that are in the room are not even remotely close to your ideal client profile and your target buyer personas, and of those 20%, you're competing with 200 other booths and 100 other speakers, and a lot of the people that are attending aren't even on the decision committees. They're more salespeople selling to salespeople, marketers selling to marketers. Like, what are you doing? No wonder you're not getting the results that you're looking for. It's the wrong people in the wrong places. What does the right people in the right places look like? Look, you got 100 target accounts that are relevant for a particular buyer persona. For that particular buyer persona, in those 100 accounts, you've identified 1,200 people that really matter. And then there's another 3,000 or 4,000 people that are adjacent to those 1,200 people that really matter. Concentrate on inviting those 1,200 people and the 3,000 or 4,000 people that are adjacent to them to your events. What do the logistics look like? What does it cost to actually do these events to drive a better lead generation engine for your hyperscale website? You don't need much. If you have a conference room that seats 15 or 20 people that has a TV mounted on the wall, you're off to the races. You had a classroom that can seat 30 or 40 people, even better. Do you have a foyer that can be repurposed like that? Should work just fine. So what we need to do is get our core buyer personas to see your internal subject matter experts as some of the most insightful, most helpful, most knowledgeable, friendliest people on the planet when it comes to anything and everything having to do with your hyperscale related category. And if they're located close by enough where they're within a 30 or 60-minute drive and they can come to this monthly events month after month, fantastic, run these in person. If they're long distance, run them as webinars. If you don't like the fact that you're not getting 100% attendance rate, just a heads up, almost nobody gets 100% attendance rates on free breakfast seminars and lunch and learns and webinars. Record it. Make the recording available for the people who weren't able to attend, for the coworkers that should have been in the room of the people that attended that weren't able to attend. Make the slides available and repurpose it a dozen different ways. At the end of the day, this is all about alignment. And when you can get 2, 3, 4 people from the same company attending and learning together, you are proactively driving alignment in the formative stages of the buyer's journey. Now, this is intentional lead generation. It's focused on a very specific segment, on a very specific buyer persona, and very specific early and middle stages of the journey. And when they're getting great value, they're going to come back next month and the month after that, and they're going to bring more and more of their coworkers with them. That's going to help you get more and more surface area on the decision committee. A lot of people, when it comes to website lead generation, think the more the merrier. And the more you're leaning on free traffic, meaning organic search engine optimization and organic social, the more likely it is that you're going to have a less than optimal match rate against what's qualified, what's in your ideal client profile. Why? Because you really can't be that specific about who sees organic visibility on a search engine or on a chat tool or on a social media platform. If you want incredible levels of precise traffic going to your lead generation landing pages, well, that's what outbound is for. That's what ads are for. That's what extreme precision is for. And when it comes to hyperscale, typically the unit economics are really, really strong. You're talking about 6, 7, 8-figure deals. So with all of that in mind, rather than playing this blame game and pointing fingers at these leads suck, the quality is not good, blah, 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 blah. What it largely comes down to is being self-aware enough that when the unit economics are really, really strong, when the clients are really, really worth a lot, stop trying to go cheap. Stop trying to look for silly shortcuts that stopped working 5 years ago with highly technical, highly skeptical stakeholders, and focus on going directly to the decision committee, going to the right stakeholders. Do this one segment at a time. So if you have 3 or 4 segments, 3 or 4 different kind of buyer personas, 3 or 4 weeks in a month, we're not talking about events that are expensive or incredibly time consuming to run. We're talking about reserving your conference room between 11 and 1 p.m. on Wednesdays. And the first Wednesday of the month is for CTOs. And the second Wednesday of the month is for cybersecurity folks. And the third Wednesday of the month is for channel partners, or whatever the segmentation strategy is that works for you. Obviously, you're going to want to experiment and find the right days of the week and the right times of the day and the right formats. But the basic idea is that when you get a couple dozen people from your target accounts and they're starting to bring their coworkers along with them, and they come back month after month to learn from your team members, magical things will happen with lead generation, sales cycle acceleration, educating and building trust. I hate to use the word indoctrination because it has like some negative connotations to it, but we're sharing our best practices and methodologies in a very, very dramatic way that shapes how they look at your category. And by getting to spend time with a lot of your best internal and external subject matter experts, you will truly, truly stack the decks in your favor. So for optimizing that hyperscale website for lead generation in the AI era, I'd be focusing on primarily driving leads and registrations for your next upcoming educational event that lines up perfectly or nearly perfectly with your most important prioritized segments. What's up next? How do we align data center sales and marketing teams for better lead generation outcomes? How do we align better sales, marketing, go-to-market teams for better lead generation outcomes? There's a couple of best practices that I would lean into. For starters, if marketing works for sales, marketing is never going to get to do marketing. Repeat that again. If marketing is buried underneath sales in your organization chart, meaning that they become order takers for the sales team, they essentially become sales assistants, and there's a very, very high likelihood that they're not actually even going to get to do marketing, because all they're going to be focused on doing is deal support to get things over the finish line in the next 29 days, which pretty much starves your company and your team, your brand, everything from ever being able to educate and build trust, from ever being able to really strongly competitively position itself in the marketplace, because the cycles are just wildly, wildly unrealistic relative to at a high level. If you think about, we're in a self-driven buyer's journey now, where nearly all of the research and decision-making now happens without you in the room. When marketers take their marching orders from account executives and sales managers, what ends up happening is everyone is forced to spend pretty much 100% of their time in the final 17% of the buyer's journey. The first 83% of the buyer's journey for your core buyer personas, you're completely missing in action, which is a shame, because that's all of the surface area that's available for you to be able to differentiate, for you to competitively position, for you to be able to share your best practices and shape the beliefs and the priorities of your most important segments, the future clients and prospects that you actually want. So best practice number one is, if there is a VP of marketing, there must be a VP of sales. Second, the headcount needs to be proportional to actually the buyer's journey. Seems like a no-brainer, right? Third is the idea of what account executives and what sales development, what business development reps are spending their time on will inevitably need to change, Because for most companies, they're still running sales and marketing their playbooks as if we're still living in 10 years ago, as if ChatGPT and generative AI never happened, as if LinkedIn never reached full tipping point adoption, YouTube never reached full tipping point adoption. We're thinking of this metaphorical baby boomer who still never got a smartphone, who has a flip phone, who went on LinkedIn once 5 years ago, hates YouTube, never attended a webinar, let alone spoke at a webinar, which we know is absolutely ridiculous. I'm Gen X, all the baby boomers that I know that still work either full-time or in many cases part-time as advisors now in the data center industry are 100% digitally transformed. They're on LinkedIn all the time. They speak at webinars. They attend webinars. They're panelists on podcasts. Some of them have their own podcasts. So this notion that your clients are different and they're not going to be influenced by using ChatGPT or Copilot or Perplexity or Gemini to figure out your category, who do you think you're marketing to? This 120-year-old person? Like, what? Do your customer insight research. Seriously, do your customer insight research and figure out where they're learning, what their resources are, how they're influenced, what's shaping their criteria. Really, really significant, really, really important. So when it comes to aligning sales and marketing teams, why that's so incredibly important is sales professionals, account executives, sales development reps who used to punt things over to marketing and say, I'm not getting involved in content or blogs or videos or podcasts or webinars. That's marketing's job. They'll tell me when I need to show up. That is a very, very, very dangerous attitude to have in a digital first era, in an AI driven era. Why? Because your brand, your expertise, your perception among the perception that your prospects and clients have about your expertise is likely one of the few moats that's keeping you employable. Repeat that again. In a world where self-driven journeys are now the predominant journey, and so many companies within the data center ecosystem are leaning into self-service and e-commerce and self-onboarding and self-provisioning on marketplaces and channel partners, as a career data center marketer, as a career data center sales professional, your Rolodex, you want to talk about really going back to a generation ago, your network of contacts is not enough to protect you anymore because that has been commoditized. The content has been commoditized. The events are a freaking mess. We talk about that at length. But the one thing that will still protect you and put a moat around your career employability is being able to be seen as a peer of your prospects and clients, which means in many cases leveling up on training and certifications that most of your prospects and clients have. In other words, if you do your homework and you discover that they all have this Red Hat certification, this IBM certification, this AWS certification, this Cisco certification, or this Schneider Electric certification, like you find there's 4 or 5 core certifications that most of even the intermediate level stakeholders in those companies have. Well, if you want to stay in the game, there's a really, really good chance that you're going to want to find time to take those same courses and get those same certs to be on a level playing field so they see you as a peer. This is why we see so many companies that are hiring career IT professionals and engineers into these roles, because they know in a self-driven journey, the way to still get back in there is they'll still talk to peers and they'll still consume learning and development. And when it comes to sales and marketing teams aligning for better lead generation outcomes, aligning on lead generation that's focused on hosting your own educational events is just about the most fantastic resource use of your time compared to going to events where you don't have a snowball's chance in heck of educating and building trust, and going to events that have an exceptionally low match rate relative to your target accounts, relative to your ideal client profile, and prioritize buyer personas. So what does this look like? Sales and marketing looking at the customer insights and saying, we discovered for these 2 or 3 really important segments to your team that there's these 10 or 12 topics, and we're going to put together these educational events programs. And okay, so among the existing internal resources that we have across our marketing and sales teams, we think we can cover 4 or 5 of these 12 topics with internal speakers. Okay, who are we going to ask externally? Who's got clients? Who's got channel partners? Who's got vendors? Who's got colleagues that we can bring in as a guest speaker? This is the kind of collaboration that is incredibly important. Historically, AEs have said, tell me The booth. I'll hang out at the booth and I'll talk to the hot leads. We now live in a world where the only people that are open to having a conversation at the booth are in that last 5 or 10% of their journey. 90 to 95% are so ridiculously sales allergic. So yeah, when they are showing up, there is a good chance that they're late in the journey. The problem is if you weren't with them in the first 83%, someone else coached them on what to look for. And if that someone else wasn't you, you're immediately treading water in a very, very dangerous shark circling around kind of treading water. So the key unlock with all of this for aligning data center sales and marketing teams for better lead generation outcomes is understanding just how much the buyer's journey has changed in the last 10 years and making sure that your culture, your investments, your prioritize are leaning heavily into your company being seen as the be-all end-all expert in anything and everything having to do with your category in the data center. And to the extent that marketing and sales are collaborating well on that kind of initiative, fantastic outcomes can happen. To the extent that marketing and sales hate spending time with each other, make fun of each other behind each other's back, deliberately try to sabotage each other, not good things going to happen. So these are massive measure of cultural trust kinds of things. Even like it's very common now in the data center industry that marketers go along to the sales kickoff meeting. But in most cases, the sales kickoff meetings have the marketers running the infrastructure and being the workers that are holding up all of the stuff to make the sales kickoff event happen. In other words, they're being seen as order takers. They're being seen as subservients. They're literally being seen as almost like the waiters and the waitresses of the sales kickoff event, the AV techs of the kickoff event. When in reality, there's so much more to gain when you're on a level playing field and you're all cheering for the same winning competitive go-to market outcome. A lot of companies aren't going to make this leap. They just can't bring themselves to change the inertia of putting 80 or 90% of their program budgets in massive global and national conferences because they think they need to go head to head with the Fortune 1000 giants in their category. It's a shame because what's ending up happening is not only is this dog-headedness, not only is the stubbornness to change hurting your company's competitive position and hurting your margins, it will inevitably lead to layoffs. It's inevitably shrinking your talent pool. You know, there's a lot of people who can't do a job with a 50%, 75% travel requirement. When in reality, what's sitting right in front of you is the ability to run events pretty much every single week, 45, 48 weeks of the year, where the events out of pocket cost about $500 to $1,000 per event. Seriously, you got a conference room that seats 20 people. How much could it possibly cost to bring in bagels, fruit salad, and pastries for a breakfast event? To bring in salads and pizza and sandwiches for a lunch and learn event? Your CFO will freaking love this stuff. And the best part from your sales director's perspective is the only people that are getting invited are on your target account list. Obviously, hitting it out of the park is getting a room full of decision makers. Yeah, it's awesome when that happens, but it's almost as awesome if we can get all the people that work with and work for those decision makers coming together and dramatically improving our surface area. When we do a great job at the event, the decision makers will know and will likely start attending. And the very likely outcome that happens in most cases when you're running this playbook, 4 or 5 of the seats are from the same company in a 20-seat classroom. One of them pulls you aside and says, "Hey, we got a lot of people from our team. We have our IT offsite coming up next month. Why don't you just come and present to our whole organization?" You're like, that would be awesome. You want to talk about having great surface area that's in there where you're educating and building trust. That's what this is all about. Sales and marketing, driving amazing, intentional, early, middle, late stage leads by getting in early and often and educating and building trust. That's how to get the much better lead generation outcomes. We're going to take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to dive into a couple more really top of mind go-to-market sales and marketing challenges throughout the data center ecosystem.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey there, Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and you are watching the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, where each week we look at a handful or so of the biggest sales and marketing challenges throughout the data center industry. If you have an idea for a future topic, a big goal or a challenge that's driving you nuts or frustrating your team or your company, and you think that's something that we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments wherever you're watching, and we'll add that to the consideration queue for an upcoming episode. So what is up next? Next, we're going to talk about how to measure and iterate on data center lead generation effectiveness. How to measure and iterate on lead generation effectiveness. So what's most important on lead generation effectiveness is to first start from a position that our number one goal is to improve the amount of minutes, improve the amount of hours that we spend in front of people from our target accounts that are stakeholders that will ultimately weigh in on their future direction with a product or service that's either directly or indirectly in your category. In other words, the right people from the right company in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right contexts, so that the right people from the right companies see you and your client-facing team members as some of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to anything and everything that is directly related to your niche, to your segment within the data center industry. So that's what lead generation needs to support. A lot of times people have a very, very confused definition of what they call a lead. If you just spent $120,000 on a booth at a national conference, those badge scans, you sold someone on them being leads. We scanned 370 badges. We got 370 leads, until you start to look at them and realize that, that's interesting. 170 of those 370 are in a country we can't even sell to. Of the 200 that are remaining, 60 of those 200 have a sales title, and salespeople typically aren't our internal champions. So again, we need to be really, really clear about what a lead is. And some people buy lead lists. I've had a lot of people over the last couple of years come to me and like, can we buy a lead list from you? Can we rent a lead list from you? Like, what purpose? Like, there are media companies in this industry that are also in the big time conference businesses that effectively are doing that exact same thing. So the question is, if we're truly self-aware about how much buyer preferences have changed, and the name of the game is to educate and build trust throughout the full buyer's journey with the right people from the right companies in the right context, everything with our lead generation strategy needs to support that. Not high pressuring or manipulating or tricking people into putting them into a funnel that they didn't get asked to get put into. It's astonishing. Aside from the booth that cost $120,000, the cocktail party that cost $95,000, or the golf tournament that cost $45,000, whatever, like all of a sudden, because of the amount of money that was spent, all of a sudden those are leads. Really, they're leads. You educated and built trust with the people at the cocktail party. You took out the PowerPoints, the Google Slides, the methodologies, the matrices. You showed them all the best practices on the golf cart, in the box, at the hockey game or the football game or the basketball game or baseball game. That's where the education and trust building was happening. So like, I don't truly understand why all of your prospects and clients are telling you that we are at a trust epidemic. They don't trust anyone anymore. Mainstream media, politicians, whatever the heck led us to this trust epidemic. And they're telling you exactly what you and your team need to do to educate and build trust. And you think they're bluffing. You think they want to be invited to another party. They think that you want them to bribe them with a lavish experience. They're telling you what makes them trust a company. And yet, for some reason, you think it doesn't apply to you. But I say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. They don't want to spend time with marketers and salespeople anymore. All of the preferences and all the modern journey supports that they're almost ready to buy before they will endure selfish sales processes, selfish prospecting processes. So that means that the only way left for you to get in isn't to manipulate or bribe your way in. It's to earn your way in. A lot of people think that their prospects are purchasable. If they spend enough money, oh, well, they're going to completely forget about being skeptical and cynical and not trusting vendors. That's not how it works. Just isn't. They're learning. They're figuring out your category. They're figuring out how they're going to achieve their goal. How did they know what their goal is? Because it's in their objectives and key results for the quarter, their OKRs. It's their KPIs for how they get evaluated. It determines whether they get promoted or the opposite of a promotion. It shows up in their job descriptions. And what's driving them nuts? Well, if you're in the education and trust building business and you're generating leads, you're going to earn a very, very important privilege. You're going to get to ask them what is driving them nuts. And you know what? When it's an education and trust building context, there's a pretty good chance that they're actually going to tell you the real information. If you show up acting like an aggressive salesperson who's trying to get them on a deal board where they know that this information can and will be used against them, they're not giving you the real information. They don't trust you. They just see you as a pushy, slimy salesperson. So we need to get out of the pushy, slimy salesperson category, and we need to reposition you to be seen as a teacher, as a consultant, as an expert, as a trusted advisor. So when we talk about measuring and iterating on lead generation effectiveness, we need to first start with living in the right decade. They've spoken. The days of 10 years ago where they spent half of their journey with you are done. We're not going back. I don't see anyone asking for the phone book or the BlackBerry or the fax machine or the printed trade publications. You know what? I am Gen X, and in the very, very early stages of my career, late teens, early 20s, when I first started in the IT business, you know how I learned about what was going on? I read 200 or 300 page trade publications. In some weeks, maybe there were 100 and 150 pages. Things like CRN, Computer Reseller News, Computer World, IT World, all of these great publications at the time. If you want to know what things cost, there was this phone book size trade publication that was big in the US called Computer Shopper. It was like 500, 600, 700 pages if you wanted to know. And it was mostly ads. It didn't have a lot of editorial content. I don't see anyone saying, you know what, G2, way too efficient. G2 has its own critics and fair share of pros and cons and everything like that. But I don't see anyone saying, bring back the paper trade publication, bring back the phone book, bring back the BlackBerry, bring back the fax machine. So with that in mind, we need to be practical to understand that we're not going back to 20 years ago. We're not going back to 10 years ago. The adoption curve on the generative AI apps is insane. And it's the reason why there's all this crazy amount of growth going on where people watch Jensen Huang's speech as if they're watching the chairman of the Federal Reserve. They're literally hanging on his every word to decide where they're going to change their GTM to where they're going to change their playbook. I know because I interview dozens of go-to-market leaders every single year on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and a good quarter of them specifically mention that they're watching NVIDIA. They're watching what Jensen says. They're on a first-name basis with Jensen, like he's Madonna or Cher or something like that. They're watching what Jensen says and does because that's driving all of the investments in the data center industry. So if you buy into the idea that NVIDIA is literally, and OpenAI are literally running the entire industry, how could you possibly think that the self-driven buyer's journey doesn't apply to you? Do you think your prospects and customers have never heard of ChatGPT? Do you think they've never used like Copilot or Gemini or something like that? Let's get real. That's your competition. Is literally your competition. So if you want to continue to measure and iterate and do better on lead generation effectiveness, we need to provide more value than they can get from these self-driven apps and these motions. So they need to see you as a peer. They need to see you as an expert. So to the extent that marketing and sales are institutionally doing ridiculous things like blocking their team members from participating in podcasts and panels and webinars because heaven forbid they might say something that is at 100% on the brand script, you're screwing yourself over more than you realize. There's a good reason why there's a massive trust epidemic globally of the general public with the data center industry. It's self-imposed. And it's mostly starting with the operators, because the operators are terrified that their venture capital and private equity overlords, if they miss a comma, they screw up a semicolon, that they're going to instantly get fired. This is leading to the trust epidemic. It is so messed up, because we can't possibly have media guidelines or media training that would set more people up to actually be in a trusted position in this industry. Or my favorite one is, well, we'll let them speak at an event if we have a financial relationship with the event, because the event organizer is going to come out with the hook or the censor button or the red beep button, as if the FCC was sitting there and say, oh, you can't say that. So there's all this crazy that's causing lead generation effectiveness and trust epidemic. That what we're talking about is a trust epidemic. And if you don't buy into the idea that it's all about trust, nothing with your lead generation effectiveness is ever going to work. So in most companies, this needs to start all the way at the top. If you work for a Fortune 1000 company, it's probably your division managing partner, division VP, or whatever it is, or subsidiary VP. But for anyone that's in a company with a few hundred employees or less, this is decided all the way at the CEO and the board level. This is a culture issue. And this is someone in your C-suite waking up and saying, you know what, we are tired of our sales team getting jerked around and getting ghosted. We're tired of the sarcasm. We're tired of the condescension. We're better than that. We have some of the smartest people on the planet. We have some of the best products and services and best value proposition on the planet. It is time we let the industry know about that. And we're not going to allow the gatekeepers block us from doing it. We're going to go direct to our target accounts. We're going to go direct to our buyer personas, and we are going to educate and build trust as if our company's survival depends on it. Because it does. No amount of lavish cocktail party, cabana party, golf tournament, World Series tickets, Super Bowl tickets, any of that is going to save you if your prospects and clients don't trust your company, if they don't trust your team. It is all about educating and building trust. The only way for you to earn your way back in early and often in a self-driven buyer's journey is to have significant surface area and footprint in their professional development and learning and development. It is astonishing the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into global conferences. And seriously, does no one realize that only 3% of the people that go to a conference get to educate and build trust? The other 97% that are going better not figure this out, because if the other 97% don't go to that conference, the conference stops existing. There's no one in the audience for the speakers to speak to. There's no captive audience to walk the booths during the open bar and get their badge scanned. If you wonder why this circus has so much scorn from outside of the industry, with the general public not trusting that jobs are going to be created, not trusting what's going to happen to an electric grid or water supply and all this stuff, we are treading water because some of the biggest money in our category has muzzled and censored common sense out of the building. It is so screwed up. Sorry. Sorry. It's the reality is we need to do better. We need to do better. If you're worried about lead generation effectiveness, it isn't just about the leads. It is about educating and building trust early and often. It is about being very deliberate on who we spend our time with, from the right accounts, the right people in the right accounts, and in the right context. And anything that interferes with that takes some of your smartest people and puts them on the road for 24 of these a year, and another 2, 3, 4 days before, another 2 or 3 days afterwards, to the point where 45 to 48 weeks of the year is spent running from one circus to the next. Of course they're distracted. Of course they have no time to get in and build relationships with the right people in the target accounts. Of course they have no time to participate in professional development and learning development. The priorities, I'm waiting for Michael Lewis to show up with Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt and do the Moneyball movie or the Big Short movie for what's going on right here. Because all I see is this is medieval thinking. It's dinosaur thinking, all the wrong questions, all the wrong priorities. If you want to fix your lead generation effectiveness, fix the culture that's wrong in the company right now, that's causing no one to trust each other in the company, and the outside the outside most important stakeholders not to trust the company either. It's the trust epidemic. So when it comes to measuring and iterating on data center lead generation effectiveness, get it right at the top first, really. If you can change the culture of the company so that you're seen as some of the top experts, some of the top trusted advisors, some of the top thought leaders in your space, a lot of these lead generation, pipeline generation, stalled deals problems start to fix themselves pretty quickly. And the good news is most of the companies that you compete with are so brainwashed, so whipped, so complacent, so following herd mentality that it does take a little bit of time. It does take a little of investment to get this momentum going. But when you can run events for $500 to $1,000 an event and everyone else is putting $100,000 into an event, you can learn and iterate a lot faster. You can go a lot more granular, a lot more specific, and beat them at their game before they ever realize what's happening. So that's what I'd be thinking about when it comes to measuring and iterating on data center lead generation effectiveness. Next question up is, if you're getting good value, if you're enjoying, if I'm piquing your attention, if I'm making you a little bit uncomfortable with this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure to hit the like button to help spread the word. So next up is all about tech, sales and marketing tech, specifically CRM and marketing tools and sales tools. So how do we track and nurture data center leads using CRM and marketing and sales tools, MarTech and sales tech? How do we track and nurture data center leads using CRM and marketing tools? The most important role of these marketing and sales tools isn't about getting attribution perfect. You're not going to get attribution perfect anymore. Ever since the iPhone started blocking third-party cookies and Google threatened on and off for several years about blocking third-party cookies, and all the pools of data started shrinking and started getting inconclusive information and people bouncing on, you're not going to get perfect attribution data anymore. The vendors that sell these things want to lead you to believe that we live in this 2010s utopia and you'll get perfect data, but the reality is simply asking on your form, how do you heard about us, making it a required field. Asking when someone creates a deal in your CRM, asking when someone onboards a new client, asking 2, 3, 4 times in their own words to describe how they heard about us will 9 times out of 10 be way more reliable than trying to figure out last touch, first touch, multi-touch. All of it is highly flawed in a world where the cookie is evil. C is for cookie. That's bad enough for me, right? Cookie, not for me. Sorry for any of you that have toddlers that had to endure my very botched Sesame Street impression. Sesame Street was actually a big deal for us Gen Xers growing up in the 70s and 80s. So before there was the Disney Channel and before there was YouTube and before there was all these different ways for kids to learn, how did they ever learn the alphabet? Hey, how did our parents learn the alphabet going back to before public television? Anyway, so how do we track and nurture data center leads using CRM and marketing tools? The end of the day, what we're trying to optimize for is education and building trust. And being very specific about your ideal client profile, being very specific about the target account lists, and really understanding what's going on in their world. What we're really trying to do is to optimize getting the most important people from the most important accounts to spend more time with you and your client-facing team members in a professional development, learning and development kind of mode, where they're learning from you, when they're learning from your team, where you're continually educating and building trust. That's why hosting your own events in person and digitally are so incredibly impactful, because it's exactly what it is. It's not disguised as riding around on a golf court or having martinis or watching a sports game or something like that. No, we're focusing just on what matters most, helping them do their jobs better, understanding best practices in a way that dramatically increases the trust and the perceived value and helps to shape the criteria that they use to evaluate the different options that are in your category. For sure, it keeps you on the short list. It starts to shorten the short list because they realize that they're learning so much from your team. They're getting so much value from their team. Why would they want to go elsewhere to learn? And essentially, your learning and development, your professional development, your events experiences become a very strong competitive weapon to knocking competitive options out of contention. So when it comes to tracking and nurturing these leads in your CRM and in your marketing and your sales tools, we're primarily talking about using highly segmented, highly personalized email marketing and highly segmented, highly personalized event marketing on these platforms. So everyone's looking for some massive Gen AI tool that can do this all on autopilot and personalize at scale and everything. But the reality is the topics have changed, the urgency has changed, but I've been using CRM tools and marketing and sales technology tools since the 2010s. I was a relatively early adopter with webinars and YouTube and LinkedIn starting in 2007, 2008. I was a relatively early adopter with HubSpot from Marketing Hub and then CRM starting in the early 2010s. And the basics are still really, really important. Segmentation, personalization, understanding the different personas, understanding the different stages they go to, and the events. The great part for relatively small companies is it doesn't take a lot of capital to run these great events. It takes some thought, it takes some care, it takes delivering value and showing up consistently. The often part is just as important as the early part. By early, I don't mean breakfast seminars, I mean early in the journey. We need to be there. They're going to go through 25 or 30 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. If we can get 12 of those 28 touch points to involve them spending 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes with one or more of your team members, learning from your team members, magical things really start to happen. So when it comes to using your CRM and your marketing tools and sales tools, like it's not super complicated. Like a marketing technology portal, email marketing tools, basic CRM, basic landing page registrations. If you're doing webinars, basic webinar software, like these are mature tools. They've been around for 10, 15 years. Obviously, you want the best practices to make sure they integrate well with each other so you don't embarrass yourself by treating a prospect as a client or vice versa, or sending the wrong message to the wrong offer, the wrong event invitation to the wrong people. But I mean, the tracking and the nurturing is pretty basic stuff. I think the most important place where people are going off the rails in the data center industry is all of their attention is outside of the realm of tracking and nurturing leads using a CRM and marketing tools in an education and trust building context. Nearly all of their attention is being diverted away to really, really expensive national and global conferences because someone on the board, someone in a leadership position thought that it was important for you to be in front of hundreds and thousands of people at a time, even if there's a very low match rate on your ideal client profile, and even if virtually nobody from your company is getting the opportunity to educate and build trust. I want to flip that completely around. I want to be a hero with your CFO by taking that $100,000, $500,000, $5 million a year budget and collapsing that down to $50 to $500 and $1,000 events. You can run an awful lot of $500 and $1,000 events in your classroom or conference room for what it costs to even do one of those events. And second, I want to be a hero with your chief commercial, chief revenue officer by having everyone that's invited to those events coming from one of your target accounts and one of your prioritized buyer personas. And I want to be a hero with your sales team and your account management team, because by the time people are ready for a sales conversation, you've educated and built trust with them like there's no tomorrow. They are literally quoting your best practices and methodologies to their coworkers. They're using your playbook as their playbook. All of the onboarding problems start to go away. All the churn problems start to go away. Expansion, smooth and easy and predictable. Getting to initial value, intended value, extended value, very smooth and predictable because you are with them throughout the full buyer's journey, educating and building trust. So when it comes to tracking and nurturing the leads and best practices around CRM, customer relationship management software, and marketing technology and sales technology, go back to the basics. Provide value to your most important prospects and clients that sit in your prioritized buyer personas in a way that gets you to earn your way in early and often with a lot of very, very high quality minutes and a lot of very, very high quality hours of educating and building trust with the right people from the right companies at the right times, plural, and most of all, in the right context. So they see you and your client-facing team members as some of the most insightful, helpful, knowledgeable, partnership-minded people in the industry when it comes to anything and everything having to do with your category. If you have an idea for a question or a topic that you think we should address in an upcoming show, be sure to leave that in the comments, and we'll add that to the consideration queue for upcoming episodes. Okay, that brings us to our final question for this week. What do we got? How do we improve enterprise data center customer communications? How do we improve enterprise data center customer communications? That is a fantastic question. And I think there's a couple of places where people are going off the rails and doing the opposite of improving when it comes to their customer communications. First place off the rails, number one, is we need to respect that your enterprise clients are just like your mid-market clients and just like your SMB clients in one respect, in that people are more sales allergic than they've ever been. There is a crisis of trust. And as a result, they want to self-serve as much as possible. And generative AI and ChatGPT and all the tools like that have only accelerated that in recent years. It doesn't matter whether your core buyer personas are Gen Z or millennial or Gen X or boomers. It cuts across all of the generations at this point. All of these tools have hit critical tipping points of nearly overwhelming adoption across all of these segments, all of these buyer personas. Of course, do your own customer insight research to validate it for you, but it's hard to, in any of the 57 different segments that we track within the data center industry, we have yet to find significant pockets of their buyer personas that are internal champions for these kinds of initiatives that aren't attached at the hip all day long with their smartphone, that don't use Slack and SMS and watch YouTube videos and ask questions on LinkedIn. Like, they're not clamoring for the days when they used to get a printed trade publication. They're not waiting for a conference that's 6 months to a year from now to figure out how to solve a specific problem. No, they're very much empowered. They were empowered 10 years ago when it came to mobile devices and Google and Siri. Now it's like on steroids because they don't need to click and read the 10 blue links anymore. They can get things in seconds that used to take them 10, 20, 30 minutes of research to do or require delegating to a team member. So that's shift number one, is we've jumped from 10 years ago, 57% of the way through the journey before sales contact to now 83% of the way through the journey before sales contact. We actually, at DCSMI, we actually think that number is significantly higher. In most parts of the data center ecosystem, it's usually at least 90% of the way through research and decision-making before you get to meet a prospect or a client. So if you don't have a strategy for communicating your way into that first 83, 85, 97%, you're sunk because someone else is shaping the criteria that your enterprise buyers are using for determining their priorities. So the self-driven journey is a really big deal. Second, the reason we've ended up in a self-driven journey isn't just because the technology got so good. It's because they don't trust the humans anymore. They don't trust people anymore. There's all kinds of surveys that validate that what professions are trustworthy and what professions are not. Unfortunately, most members of a typical go-to-market team in the data center industry are in a place where their prospects and clients simply don't trust the job category very much anymore. And as a result, they want to be in the driver's seat. They want to have all the power. They want to keep all the chips. And that's another thing that's strongly favoring that. And then the third part is we see a lot of people that are very resistant to the idea of segmentation. And there's segmentation by who they are, and there's also segmentation by where they are in their research and decision-making process. And it used to be that 10 years ago, it was a nice to have a separate website page and separate lead generation offers and a separate event strategy for different roles, different job functions, different behavioral profiles within these companies, these buyer personas. And it was also a nice to have different lead generation offers and premium content offers for early awareness, for middle consideration, for late decision stage. Those are not nice to haves. They're like, if you don't have, like, you don't even have the 2010s playbook at your disposal right now. So like making sure that you check off all of those boxes to have that super crisp ideal client profile, continually updated customer insights. Like those personas aren't things that you do once every couple of years and sit them behind museum glass or put them in a plastic sheet protector or put them in lock mode in Google Drive or something like that. No. Highly competitive marketplace, very dynamic marketplace. Those need to be refreshed at least once a year, ideally once a quarter. And if you're using generative AI tools to refresh those, there really, really is no excuse not to keep that data really, really fresh. The reality is we're still in the relatively early stages of measuring the financial impact of visitors coming to your website from generative AI tools compared to traditional search. But there seems to be a lot of evidence of shorter sales cycles, higher average order values, higher margins, less resistance, all of the strong positive to the right hockey stick kind of indicators that the days of thinking that you don't need to be in the business where you have self-service content that feeds the answer engines, that feeds the generative AI tools and the other similar kind of tools where people go for research and things self-service, like you're really, really at a strong competitive disadvantage if you're fighting this kicking and screaming. A lot of when we hear people talk about communications, a lot of times they're thinking not just of pre-sales, they're thinking of post-sales as well. That's another big emerging trend that we've seen also, is in the same way that your prospects and clients have gotten more sales allergic, they kind of lump the account managers and client success in with the salespeople for a couple of reasons. One is someone on a board of directors at a SaaS company 10 years ago said it would be a good idea for account managers and CSMs, client success managers, to report to the VP of sales, to report to the chief revenue officer. And all of a sudden, instead of worrying about helping newly onboarded clients get the best use out of their tool, they're trying to figure out if there is a sales opportunity to upsell, to cross-sell, to get to be a revenue hero with that newly onboarded client, as opposed to protecting that from churn. So like there's all these conflicting messages for sure. So yeah, you have enterprise communications people getting involved in creating self-service resources now, because so much of the trust epidemic that impacts marketing and sales now impacts post-sales as well. So they want self-serve onboarding resources. They want on-demand resources that they can do on their own time without having to have human contact for exactly those somewhat ugly reasons that kind of are self-imposed that we did to ourselves. For sure, product teams need help with communications. That's why there's a whole separate category of product marketing that's more important than ever in a self-driven buyer's journey. And so few people think about is your channel. If you have a channel organization, channel partnerships organization, they for sure need channel marketing materials. They need channel onboarding materials. They need to basically take some of the internal onboarding that's used for your AEs and your SDRs and your CSMs and make channel specific versions of those so that they can be more successful in helping you achieve and scale beyond channel partner market fit. And then a huge, huge area that everyone overlooks when it comes to communications is in a self-driven journey. It's not just your prospects and clients and customers and channel partners that want that self-driven journey. Your candidates do too, your job candidates. So future hires that are in your talent pipeline, they would much, much rather consume content than talk to one of the people on your team in most cases, because again, it's the same trust epidemic. So employer marketing, employer branding has become a really, really hot area. Most companies suck at this, which is a shame, because really the same kind of content marketing skills that exist in your own marketing team could be redeployed to a couple of candidate personas and do amazing things for your company. And a lot of this talent crisis is also, that's part of the leaky bucket in the talent crisis, is you're losing people who are able to find better employer marketing from other companies that are sharing more of what it's like to really truly work at your company, as opposed to just the heavily sanitized version that they're getting from a talent acquisition manager. So yeah, there's a lot of complex dynamics that are going on. But when it comes to improving enterprise data center customer communications, the unit economics on enterprise clients are off the charts valuable. The investments on the communications side haven't remotely caught up to what's truly at stake, and haven't remotely caught up to the radically different buyer preferences and candidate preferences and channel partner preferences today compared to as recently as 10 years ago. So yeah, the overall message is to understand how much the world has changed and make sure that your investments are moving to where the puck is going, not to where the puck has been. It's the often misattributed NHL Wayne Gretzky quote, right? Skate to where the puck is going, not to where it's been. There's a lot of debate as to whether that actually is truly the quote, but the widely popularized version of it is to make sure that your investments are with present and forward-looking, not past-looking. An enormous, enormous amount of financial and brand damage is being done in the data center industry, both internally and externally, by fiercely clinging to an outdated playbook that mistakenly believes that you as the company are truly in control. No, the marketplace is in control. In a self-driven buyer's journey, your brand is no longer what you say about your brand. Your brand is now the aggregate, is now the collective wisdom of what the marketplace says about you and your team members and your company when you are not in the room. If you want to align your enterprise customer communications to embrace that, you'll be in pretty good shape. If you want to pretend like everything can be heavily scrutinized and everything can be censored and everyone's loyalty is literally for sale, that you can pay off by, in essence, bribing them with an experience that kind of insults their intelligence, like, we need to recognize how we got to this place where there's a trust epidemic. These are big, big culture issues. And some organizations within the industry are starting to confront kind of symptoms of this as opposed to root causes of this. But we see a lot of the root cause is quite simple. Your buyers, regardless of their size, regardless of their location, regardless of their industry, want to be in the driver's seat, and they are in the driver's seat. And there's so many tools now that allow them to completely bypass you if they don't get what they want from you. So if you are not paying attention to what's going on in their world, if you're not providing them with what they're asking for because you think you know better, I don't know what to tell you except maybe keep your fingers crossed and hope that your small sliver of the buyers are just not indicative of where most of the marketplace is, because most of the marketplace is spoken. And the only way you're going to earn your way back in there with your communications, with your emails, with your event strategy, is to stop selling and to start teaching. To get out of the vendor box and stay out of the vendor box once and for all is this big, big, big pivot to being seen a lot more like a teacher, a consultant, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, and for some of the most experienced members on your team, being seen as a thought leader. The challenge with all of this is being intentional and very, very directionally focused on the ideal companies in your target accounts and the specific people on those decision committees that can really, really move the needle for your big growth initiatives. So that's what I'd be thinking about when it comes to improving enterprise data center customer communication. So that's the final question that we'll be addressing in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. If you have a challenge, a struggle that you're currently going through, that your team is facing, that your company is facing, you think would make a great topic to address in a future show, be sure to leave that in the comments and we'll add that to the consideration queue for upcoming episodes. If you want to get invited to upcoming educational events like this and get notified about similar kinds of educational resources, and you want that to come directly to your email inbox on Sundays, be sure to subscribe for free to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter. You can sign up. You can subscribe directly on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. I'm Joshua Feinberg from the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. If you and I are not currently connected on LinkedIn and you'd like to be sure to mention in the connection note that you've watched and that you're a fan of Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A. Just like you, I get dozens of connection invites a week, and that helps me to shortlist and make sure that I'm accepting connections from the right people that are big fans of what we're working on. So we're so glad that you're able to join us for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. We wish you, your team, your company tremendous success in capitalizing on these enormous, once in a lifetime, once in a generation kinds of opportunities in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. And we look forward to seeing you back next week. Take care now.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.